mixed costs are costs that have components of both variable and fixed elements. Think of like utilities. That's kind of the best example. Utilities costs are mixed because you typically have to pay just a certain amount of money just to have the right to use electricity. And then you also get charged an amount per kilowatt hour usually that you use in electricity. So there's a fixed component and a variable component. And this graph kind of shows that. It's talking about a truck in terms of miles driven and what would the cost of operating that truck be. Well, there is certain fixed costs associated with renting that truck. It costs you, looks like $50 no matter how many miles you drive. So $50 is the fixed cost, but then you get a charge per mile as you drive. So whatever that mileage is, I don't know if they tell us, plus 50 cents per mile up here. So you can see as the number of miles you drive goes up, your variable cost goes up. So this pink is the variable cost element. This is the fixed cost element. This red line is the total cost line. If you compare, so like at 150 miles, you'd be right about here. So the fixed cost would be there. The variable cost would be this pink area. So the red line would be the total cost. It's the sum of the pink and the blue at that level of mileage. So that's what a mixed cost is, and you can figure out a formula for mixed costs by using what we call the high-low method. You're going to be given in problems you see a bunch of data, and it's going to be for different numbers of months. The high-low method says let's look at the high month of activity and the low month of activity and figure out what's the variable component of this cost first, and then we'll figure out the fixed component. So if you look in this example, January and April, those are the biggest months in terms of mileage driven. So what you do is you take the change in total costs between the high and the low months, so that's 63 minus 30, that's 33,000, and you divide that by the high minus low activity level, which is 50 minus 20. So you get 33,000 divided by 30,000 equals $1.10. So that's the variable cost component. It's $1.10 per mile. Okay, that's the variable cost piece. So what you then do is plug that $1.10 into back into kind of like the equation and multiply it by the high and the low activity level to get the variable cost piece of the total cost. So here you have a total cost of 63 in the high month. 50,000 miles in the high month times $1.10 is $55,000. That's the variable cost piece of that 63. So the difference must be 8,000. That's the fixed cost portion. Then you can do the same thing in the low month. In the low month, you had 30,000 in total costs, but 20,000 miles driven. So 20,000 times $1.10 per mile. That's the variable cost per unit equals 22,000 in variable costs. You subtract the two, and the 8,000 must be the fixed cost piece. Now that makes sense, right? Because fixed cost has to be the same no matter what level of activity you have. So there's the fixed cost piece, and the variable cost is $1.10 per mile. So you can write this equation or the formula for this particular expense as $8,000 per month plus $1.10 per mile. And that way I can throw any number of miles at you, and you can tell me what an expected cost would be for that mileage level or that activity level.